Pastry-Bear.
Yo, this is your girl Jula. You're listening to the Pastry-Bear Podcast with Winston Murdoch. Hola, esta es Jula. Estás escuchando el Pastry-Bear Podcast con Winston Murdoch.
Wakute Podcast Pastry-Bear.
Yo, why you are run the cut in a murder? Cause the Lord
One of the significant attributes in life is the fact that we have a choice. Even though a large percentage of us humans don't utilize that God-given right. The reason for this is because of influence. Influence plays a significant role in our daily activities on this earth. And the way we eat is no different. Have you ever asked yourself why you eat the food you do? Why are you attracted to a specific type of food? Whether it's sweet or savory, salty or spicy, or even bitter. On today's episode, we will discuss the real reason behind the way Jamaicans and the Caribbean diaspora eat the way they do. What up, y'all? And welcome to another episode of the Pastry-Bear Podcast. I'm your host, Winston Murdoch.
Yo, why you are run the cut in a murder? Cause the Lord
Wakute Podcast Pastry-Bear avec Winston Murdoch.
Pastry-Bear.
Whoa, we cooking up a storm today.
Questions are vital in the transferring of knowledge amongst humans. Something I realized early on in life, and this has allowed me to learn so much about Jamaican food and its culture. I don't think I need to repeat the importance that culinary arts on the island of Jamaica has played in my life. You can listen to the first few episodes to clarify that. Just like many other Caribbean islands and countries around the world, a large portion of the culture is generated from the multitude of plants and animals and humans. On this episode, I want to explore a list of critical points that is responsible for the creation of all cuisine that make up the Caribbean, especially Jamaica, which will explain why we eat the way we do. The first thing we have to talk about is the role people and their connectivity amongst each other plays. A crucial factor that contributes to why we eat the way we do is people. There's no denying that. Just imagine living in a world with only you and your mom, for example. What would that world be like? What do you think would happen? Well, your ways of life, your beliefs, your actions, and the way you eat would be created from what you surround yourself with, which would be from your mom. And if you could put your friend in that situation, you would be influenced by your friend or family. And this indicates the significant role people play in the way we eat. You know, since the discovery of the islands that are located in the Caribbean and its first inhabitants, who were the Tainos, these group of people whose survival depended on the resources founded on the land. They were some of the most outstanding farmers, creating technologies and farming techniques and practices that are still being used in present day. Their diet include animals and vegetation, with plants like the cassava being one of the more significant crops they cultivated. The cassava was mass-produced because of its ability to grow in harsh environments and produce a large yield. 300 plus years later, we're still seeing the cassava being used in many of the islands, including Jamaica. In Haiti, they have their cassava bread. In Guyana, they have cassava pone. And in Jamaica, the cassava is used to make a product called bami. A bami is a flat bread that is served with fried fish. Most of the recipes that we know today are passed down from generation to generation, whether verbally or in written form, forging a connection, a bond between the elders and the youngsters via the food. Connection and transmission assist in the creation of food history, which is a fundamental aspect in the development of food culture. Without people, there is no history. And without history, life is a mystery. Hence the reason the connectivity of the people must be maintained, so we can consciously pass down information to the future inhabitants of the soil, to continue the traditions that will live with them wherever they go. And this connectivity has made space for communication and education that will formulate our values, lifestyle and practices, our folklores and our food culture that we display around the world. Let's take a Jamaican, for example, who is traveling or living overseas. They would drive for miles trying to find one restaurant or grocery store to buy a meal or ingredient that gives that feeling of fulfillment, which is centered around an emotion stimulated by taste, texture, smell, and feel. And these emotional stimulation was generated from that one-on-one connection earlier in the development stage of that person's life, which is influenced by a relationship with their ancestors that not only defined their roots, but determined what they eat and how they eat, which explains why we eat the way we do.
Watching a Murdoch.
Pastry-Bear. Pastry-Bear Podcast beating them real good.
Whoa, we're cooking up a storm today.
Another important factor is the movement of people. A large portion of the cuisine that we are presently enjoying throughout the world wouldn't be available if it wasn't for the migration, whether by force or by will. This created an opportunity for the exploration and cultivation of different tastes that became intertwined to create a cuisine that is one of the factors to determine why we eat the way we do. If you take a second and look at all the dishes around the world, you would see that there is many similarities in the main dishes from each country. And I believe this is because of the migration of people for centuries. Let's look at the Africans, for example. And I know I tend to talk about the Africans a lot, but there is a correlation between Africa and the Caribbean. And this is the reason I am using the Africans as a big example in everything that I speak about. When they came to Jamaica, they brought many ingredients, cooking techniques, and technologies with them. Still, while they were in Jamaica and the Caribbean, the Africans also had the opportunity to learn and try food from the Tainos, the Indians, the Chinese, the Spanish, and the Europeans in general, which allowed the development of the Creole taste and the Creole cuisine. The Africans were able and willing to inject their beliefs and knowledge about their food and ingredients along with other components of their counterparts to construct, in my perspective, one of the biggest and most popular, impressionable international cuisine. Not just for the Caribbean, but for the rest of the world. Creole food or Creole taste, whatever you want to call it, it's not just limited to Haiti or the borders of Alabama or Tennessee or South Carolina. It plays an integral part of Jamaican cuisine or in general Caribbean cuisine. And to be honest, Haiti is one of the countries that has stayed true and has a close tie to their African roots. They are preserving the Creole taste and the Creole cooking. And a lot of the other Caribbean countries, they don't even acknowledge it. But if you want to understand your cuisine, you have to understand Creole cooking. Because the Creole cooking is the mother of all cooking. It's the mother of all cuisines, in the Caribbean at least. And this is my opinion. Based on what history has taught us, the development of the Caribbean is solely based on the Africans, as they were the designers, the builders, the farmers, the chefs. They developed the land, this beautiful landscape that we live on. A majority of the food that we're having today comes from African cuisine. Let's break down what is Creole cooking. Creole cooking, by the way of the internet, or the definition of the internet, is an African cooking style with a little influence from other cuisine. The food is packed with enormous flavor, achieved via seasoning with various herbs and spices. The food should be appropriately seasoned before it's cooked, and the sauces and gravies should also be strengthened and cooked with more seasoning. The African Creole food embrace cooking proteins in their juices, the natural juices, and they cook them until they're fork tender. Even the concept of cooking well-seasoned meat slowly underground, which is the fundamental of one of the most beloved Jamaican dish, was created from Creole cuisine. This technique and cooking style have benefited many other cuisines and were passed down to generations, whether race, class, or people of different creed. Because of the movement of people, these information and these skills were able to transcend. And this factor is an apparent and precise reason that can explain why we eat the way we do.
Pastry-Bear.
Vous écoutez podcast Pastry-Bear avec Winston Murdoch.
Yo, why you are on the cut in a murder? Cause the Lord dance.
What up, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Pastry-Bear Podcast.
Pastry-Bear.
You know, movement of people didn't just bring the opportunity for one to learn from his counterpart or from his brother. It also provided an opportunity for business development, which also played a role in how we eat. Business in today's market is determining the way the average person eats. Let me explain what I'm saying. Let's look back at the 16th century. The Caribbean became increasingly popular due to its location. Agriculture was once the primary source of wealth building, which led to thousands, even millions of food crops finding their way on the island as a means of trying to explore what plants would strive. In Jamaica, for example, the sugarcane plantation became very popular as it produced good yields, which made it a very lucrative business because of the increase in demand for the brown sugar, brown gold in the world. The manufacturing of sugar influenced the way people of the island ate. With the product, the sugar, becoming more readily available, local consumption increased. And to this present day, we're still seeing an increase in the consumption of sugar in all of the Caribbean countries. So what that means? This means that one of the reasons why we see Jamaicans or some Caribbean countries intake such a high level of sugar and sweet products is because of the availability of the product. And this only indicates or shows you how business opportunities and new business ventures affect the way we eat and why we eat the way we do. As the population of the world grew, the demand for food increased. This created an opportunity for globalization. And globalization ties perfectly into business and into manufacturing. First, let's explain what globalization is. Globalization is the process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and government worldwide. So basically, it's a connection of all the countries, and we all put our resources on the table and we trade amongst each other. That is globalization. And this creates a massive bartering system with the exchange of goods and service amongst the many countries that make up the world. Globalization and the manufacturing industry has started a whole new way of eating amongst the native on the islands. There is a continuous introduction of food in the new system generating commerce. We made a move from eating food directly from our backyard farm, from our provision ground, to consuming food from large-scale farms and sometimes factories, sold in markets and supermarkets. Food has moved from being eaten fresh to now eaten frozen, or from a can, or even sometimes dried. And this allowed the food to become more readily available and cheaper. These types of food came to be the most consumed food and the most common food. And the most common food becomes a part of the cuisine. How does this work? Well, the poor class are responsible for the development of any cuisine, of any country, and we cannot deny that, which is then transcend to the middle class and the upper class. And the upper class, the ones that make food popular. So if you go anywhere in the world, you realize that a lot of the foods that are sold in Michelin restaurants are coming from the roots. The grandmother made these food. They were street foods. They were poor people food, peasant foods. And once these foods became popular amongst the poor class, the middle class started to consume it. And when the poor class and the middle class started to consume it, then we found that the upper class, the rich, the wealthy, started to consume these same foods. And that's when these foods got their publicity. That's when the food is recognized around the world. Let's look at the tin mackerel or the canned mackerel, for example. This product has become a significant part of the cuisine in Jamaica, as it is a cheaper fish that is pre-cooked in a sauce that only needs an accompaniment or a side. A popular staple in the homes of the lower class that has made its way into the middle and the upper class, solidifying its place in the market as one of the primary source of fish. Can you imagine that? A country surrounded by the ocean, primary source of fish comes from a can. This shows the impact globalization and the manufacturing industry influence the cuisine, with these prominent companies positioning profitable products in the market, which is actively redirecting or redefining or reconstructing how the people eat and why the people eat the way they do.
Pastry-Bear Podcast beating them real good.
Yo, why you are run the cut in a murder? Can the Lord
Watching a murder.
Ou écoutez podcast Pastry-Bear avec Winston Murdoch.
Pastry-Bear.
It is clear that the food and the cuisine of every island in the Caribbean has seen some changes. Some choose to hold their roots, fighting assiduously to preserve what was passed down to them from their elders, while others are creating an improved version of what the food can be in a format called fusion. With the collaboration of multiple cuisine, in the efforts of bringing something new. Then you have the other ones that are annihilating the fundamental structure of their cuisine, then take up and adapt cuisines from around the world. I often ask the question, I ask myself this question, what if Jamaica was to lose its food culture by omitting the fundamentals that created the uniqueness in the flavor and texture and its visual appearance? What if the jerk chicken evolved from the pimento herb marinated chicken that was cooked underground to a powdered-based seasoning chicken cooked in an oven? Would this change or affect the way we eat? History has shown us how the yam, the boiled dumpling, the cassava, the bami, the fried fish, and many other foods that make up the cuisine that influence how we eat have held their place for centuries. We also see where historically classic Jamaican dishes aren't often eaten on a daily basis in the homes of the inhabitants, the people that live underground in Jamaica. And contrary to popular belief that people from Jamaica are eating curry goat and oxtail and jerk chicken and curry chicken and rice and peas on a daily basis, is far from the truth. So it's clear to see the way we eat and the reason we eat the way we do has more to do with social, psychological, and economical influences rather than historical influences.
Whoa, we're cooking up a storm today.
Watching a Murdoch.
Pastry-Bear Podcast beating them real good. Pastry-Bear.
Ou écoutez le podcast Pastry-Bear avec Winston Murdoch.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Pastry-Bear Podcast.